Hey, what's up, Spartan Nation? This is the Spartan Nation Podcast. Just doing kind of a special episode. Actually, it just started, so that's awesome. Uh, Welcome to Spartan Nation Podcast. Kind of special episode today with all the news that's going on in East Lansing. So we're gonna get into it. Aiden and I have texted back and forth a little bit today. I was in Alabama for the last 10 days on vacation. Um, and somewhere between Louisville and Indianapolis on my drive home today, Aiden sends me a text about Payton Thorne and Keon Coleman entering the transfer portal. So I wrote a story in the car. Luckily, somebody else was driving as I'm coming back from home from Alabama, so I was able to write a story quick in the car and post that to our Facebook page and all of that. And then he and I made immediate plans when I got home to jump on a pod and talk about the breaking news out of East Lansing today. So yeah, we're going to get into the Payton Thorne and Keon Coleman situation in a second, but we do have more breaking news to talk about here on the Spartan Nation podcast, and that is Charles Brantley, cornerback junior. He has also entered his name into the transfer portal. So that's now 3 Michigan State starters from 2022 who have entered their name into the transfer portal within the last 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
So yeah, we got comments already pouring in, and we appreciate you guys joining us here on the Spartan Nation podcast. We're going to get to as many questions as we can, but again, we just found out minutes ago that Charles Brantley, starting cornerback, has also entered his name into the transfer portal. So that's now 3 Michigan State starters from a year ago. But let's start with the quarterback and wide receiver situation. Um, yeah, this came as a shock to me. As I said before, I was in the car coming home, and Aiden shoots me a text and says, "Hey, the story that he was preparing a story for next year's, like kind of a projection for next year's NFL draft, and it kind of went right out the window because Keon and Payton both entered the portal within about a half hour to an hour of each other. And so I guess Aiden, talk me through when you first found the news and just your immediate reactions.
Yeah. So for me, I mean, all three are surprising, no doubt. But for Thorne, just kind of evaluating the situation. Obviously, he's the starter. Obviously, there's been a lot of quarterback talk this whole off season. Just I mean, the list goes on about, Thorne and how much we've talked about him throughout last season and this season about whether, or this off season, whether or not he's the guy, Hauser, Kim, we made predictions. We said, do one of these three guys leave or enter the portal after the spring game? And the answer was yes. But it was not who we expected at all. So
No.
yeah, for me, that does come as like shocking news. For Coleman, I think yeah, again, very surprising. I think there is a very large market for Coleman in the portal. I mean, everyone wants to talk about NIL and tampering and everything like that. I mean, every team tampers. Every team has made a call to a player. I mean, including MSU staff have definitely made calls to players who are still on other teams' rosters. So I think just putting that into perspective, it is very surprising, but there is a large market for him. And I mean, there's a rumor about LSU. He's a Louisiana kid. And I mean, if you talk to anyone who's any coach that's done recruiting, they say Louisiana, the second a kid from Louisiana gets an LSU offer, it is damn near impossible to pull them out of Louisiana unless you're one of the Manning kids. Is very tough. So if LSU is really in the market for him right now, which They do need some receivers. Um, in my opinion, I think he's gone, but there is some talk about potentially returning. Um, and then as for Brantley, obviously we'll know more details kind of in the upcoming probably day or two. Now that it is later in the day. Um, so yeah, I mean that does come to a shock to me as well. We'll see where his market is. It might be a little bit between Thorne and Coleman. I mean, obviously he's a heavy hitter. He's been their best corner for the past 2 years. Came in as a true freshman, played right away. So we'll see where he goes. But I mean, all those guys are still Power Five players, and I'll definitely be interested to see where they go or if they find their way back. I think a lot of that the team themselves were surprised. I think that there were a lot of comment sections of players going, "What?" Like they couldn't really believe that this was happening.
Right. Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, there were a lot of reactions. Well, I don't know about a lot, but there were several reactions from players who are still on the roster of surprise. So it definitely sounds like this caught a lot of people off guard within the program. I think it caught everybody off guard. Like I was shocked when I heard the news. I got the news from Aiden, and then I'm scrolling through Twitter as I'm in the car for another 4.5 hours getting home. Like I said earlier, I'm in the middle of Kentucky when Aiden shared this news with me, and so yeah, it was immediate shock, and then I mostly spent the next 4.5 hours doing as much homework and research on this as I could to find out more details, and so I am gonna get into that a little bit now. And I have to give credit to Justin Thind over at 24/7 Sports, who has been kind of all over this from kind of the get go, especially specifically with Coleman and his decision to enter the transfer portal. So everything that I share for the next few minutes here is the original reporting on this was Justin Thind over at Spartan Tailgate 247.com. So I got to give him credit for it. But according to Justin, um, teams have been pitching Coleman with NIL deals for the last year and a half or so. And every time one of these situations would come across or would come about, Michigan State was like matching that NIL offer and keeping Coleman around. Um, with the NFL draft that just took place this last weekend, and Jaden Reed getting selected in the second round, despite the kind of the injury struggles that he had this season. He had a really good showing at the Senior Bowl and during pre-draft workouts. And so basically what Justin has said is teams have kind of used the next year's NFL draft as another way of trying to convince Coleman to seek other options. And basically the whisper in the ear is with Payton Thorne as your quarterback, your draft stock is going to drop next year. That's the pitch that other programs have been making, according to Justin Thind over at Spartan Tailgate 24/7 Sports. He named a few programs. Specifically, I know Miami was one of them. I want to say USC, which that comes as no surprise because USC did the same thing last year with Jordan Addison, who was the Blitnikoff Award winner as the nation's number one wide receiver 2 years ago at Pittsburgh. Lincoln Riley and his staff get on the phone and call him up and say, "Hey, enter the transfer portal and come join USC," and that pretty much happened. So not a surprise to see USC in there. I don't want to throw programs out there without having 100% knowledge, but I know those two were on Justin's list, and there were a couple more as well. And so it sounds like for the last 2 to 3 transfer portal cycles, Michigan State has been able to hold off these other programs who have been kind of tampering with Coleman. But for whatever reason, this pitch about Payton Thorne his limitations as a quarterback, those conversations, um, I guess, hit home a little closer for Coleman. And according to Justin Thind, Coleman's been kind of planning to enter the transfer portal for the last week or so. And so this was kind of something that was in the works for a while, obviously under the radar, because I think Justin didn't even find out about this until maybe yesterday, but he has sources within the program, and talking to those sources, uh, has found out that this has kind of been in the works for a little while now. As far as Payton, that came as a surprise to just about everybody, and especially to those of us who were at the open practice on April 15th, because the general consensus after April 15th was that Payton Thorne was still the front runner for the starting job. Again, that was based on what we saw at a one practice, but we did go to a press conference afterwards and we talked to Mel Tucker, and he was asked if what we saw from the quarterbacks from a reps standpoint was similar to what had been going on throughout spring practice. And Tucker confirmed that that was kind of what the rotation had been, which was Thorne, Kim, Hauser. So as Aiden said earlier, we kind of it doesn't come as a shock that one of those three quarterbacks entered the transfer portal. It would have been a bigger shock if none of them had entered the transfer portal before the 2023 season. But the fact that it was Payton, after what we saw on April 15th and had heard previously during spring practice, that's where the shock comes from. To get a little bit deeper into this, and again, this is all coming from a report from Justin Thind over at 24/7 Sports. Uh, so go check out his stuff over there. But according to him, Keon, there's actually this is things that he's found. Justin has found out. He believes, and he tweeted this out, so I don't feel bad sharing this, despite it being hidden his content, because he shared it with just about everywhere. But according to Justin, there's a higher chance of Keon Coleman returning to Michigan State with Payton Thorne entering the transfer portal, based on some of the stuff that's been going on under the table with these other programs and the way they've tried to convince Keon to seek other options, which that kind of adds a whole nother layer to it. So Aiden, what are your, when you read that from Justin, what was your kind of reaction to that?
Yeah, I mean, reading a lot of the NFL scouts evaluations of Jaden Reed, a lot of them talked about, the quarterback play held him back. I mean, people from the outside were shocked that he was drafted, high second round or like mid second round. People were thinking like lower second, third for sure. Um, but yeah, the fact that he went there, I think a lot of scouts, he was the offensive MVP at the Senior Bowl. A lot of scouts said that the quarterback play when watching the film held him back. So that does make you wonder, as if you're a player, that would kind of make you question, what you're doing, and is he really holding me back? But I think the Thorn thing, it is a little bit of over, like, he is a little bit overhated. I think, when Caden Hauser came in, obviously big time 4-star recruit, elite 11 player. I think a lot of people were already on board to play him. And, I mean, we didn't know until, you know, like you were saying, April 15th, that Thorne was playing hurt pretty much all last season.
Right.
So there is that too. And yeah, again, that makes you wonder, was him playing hurt, like, did that hurt the team more than it really hurt himself? Uh
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, obviously if you're Coleman, you're gonna explore your options. If you're Brantley, you're definitely gonna explore your options. A lot of people were saying, I know Corey Robinson, another guy at 24/7 for MSU, was talking about Auburn was in contact with Thorne before he entered the portal, and they've kind of gone through their cycle of transfer QBs really before the portal even existed, since about 2016 or 17 when they got Jarrett Stidham, and just kind of a lot of those QBs that they've played over the last 7 years have all been transfers. So yeah, we'll see where that leads Payton, because obviously his dad was the OC at Western last year, and they're no longer, or he's no longer at Western. Um, so I mean, a lot of people would have thought he would probably transfer down, but he may be transferring to a lateral school or somewhere in the SEC.
Yeah, to Cameron's point here, there has been some talk on Twitter about the fact that Auburn has been targeting Payton Thorne for a while now. Um, and so again, this is kind of the modern age of college football that we're in now. That NIL is legal, the one-time transfer rule allows kids to hop in the portal, go to their new destination, and play right away. Um, and so yeah, that's just where we're at as a college football community right now, and it's unfortunate, but I when we've talked about there are positives that we like about NIL and the transfer portal, but this is kind of the dark side of it. So yeah, and I guess my reaction to the news that Coleman has a better chance of returning to Michigan State without Payton Thorne, like regardless of your feelings on Payton Thorne, and I defended him for most of last year, but I also criticized him when I felt like it was warranted. Um, but my initial reaction to that is, regardless of your feelings on Payton Thorne, culturally, that's a problem when your star receiver has a better chance of coming back to your program when your incumbent starter starting at quarterback is on his way out. Like there's some definite issues there. Like that's not a normal thing. And I'm not trying to be naive about to the team, or anything like that Michigan
Hmm.
stuff, but like there is part of it, like it kind of shines a light maybe on more issues that went on last year, or just like the mindset and the culture that's going on in Michigan State's program right now. If that was like the reaction uh, from Keon's camp, that oh, Peyton's not going to be here, so that kind of opens the door a little bit wider that that I might return to Michigan State. That's an issue. That's a problem. Your reaction to that, Aiden?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about really the culture that Tucker's built, the last 3, 4 years ever since he got here. And it seemed very strong, last season after going 5-7, through all the way through January at least, or even just before spring practice in general, there really wasn't many contributors that were entering the transfer portal, or kind of players that were getting any playing time, looking for other, NIL options, or kind of just more, a larger role. And now we're starting to see that. And that does concern about the culture, kind of where they're at. But I'm not going to call for Tucker's job yet. Like I'm not there. Like it's kind of I think it's kind of outrageous that people are already kind of out on him for things he really can't control. He can't control NIL. He can't control the market for players. They developed Keon, they developed Thorne, they developed Brantley. So I think for that reason, I think he deserves some credit. I mean, he lost Brandon Jordan, who was arguably his best. I mean, he was his best recruiter
Yeah.
for the 9 months that he was here. Already gone to the NFL. I mean, he brings in talent. I think he has a good eye for it. I think the coaching staff can really identify. Um, but yeah, I mean, you can't really blame, him for USC or, bigger programs like LSU calling up your players and, offering money that you don't have. So I think that, I mean, it's not really his fault, but yeah, it is concerning about the culture, the fact that Keon would rather come back without Thorne than with him. But yeah,
Yeah, so just to answer Kyle's question a little bit here, he's referring to there's been a few guys who have entered the transfer portal over the last couple of years. Connor Haywood, he was a running back, entered the transfer portal when Tucker came over. Tucker then had a conversation with him. They moved him to tight end. He came back to the program after being in the transfer portal. Linebacker Ben Van Sumeren and Ma Gaetode. It's a tough last name. Both of those guys, though, they entered the transfer portal also and ended up withdrawing from the transfer portal and staying at Michigan State. That's always a possibility. I think the likelihood of that right now is low. And I haven't read anything on the Charles Brantley thing yet because that we literally found out about that news right when we went live tonight. But as far as Payton, Payton will graduate at the end of this next week, I believe. If I think I read that as I was kind of researching today. Um, and so he's a grad transfer. Um, and so, in my opinion, that kind of maybe puts a cap on his Michigan State career. Just the fact that he's a graduate, he's got 2 years of eligibility left. I do think he was irritated about just how things went last year between his injury and Michigan State keeps injuries very close to the vest, which is understandable given the fact that you don't want your opponents to know specific things about injuries. But at the same time, Payton got a lot of flack last year for the 5-7 season, and yes, part of it was on him, and he has a portion of the blame for the way things went last year. But I think as the starting quarterback, and this comes with the territory, but he got a huge chunk of the blame for last year's season. I don't think all of that was warranted. But even he admitted that he thought he could have played better and that he wasn't satisfied with the way that he played last year. So, um, but even in that last after they opened practice and we were down um, in the media room and we talked to Tucker, we talked to Payton. Payton was in there for a long time after the practice, and that's when we found out about just the very not details, but like some of the issues that he dealt with last year as far as the injuries. And I could hear it in his voice that there was a level of agitation. There was a level of um, it was like he finally was able to vent some of the things I think that he had held up for a long time throughout last year and then the off season up until that point. And he talked about how he took the late hit against Western Michigan and early in the second half, and then later in the same drive, he's in a compromised position on the ground, and a guy lands on him, and he said he partially tore something, um, and then he not detailed, but he said, for the next 6 weeks there was another thing and another thing and another thing, and so all of this came out, and I was pretty surprised that he was open and shared all of this, but given what happened today, all of a sudden that's making a little bit more sense. And he even said in that conversation, if I get in trouble for this, then I guess I get in trouble for this. And so all of a sudden, the things that he was talking about, let's see, today's the 30th, so 15 days ago, it's starting to make a lot more sense. And I think that frustration has reached a point where he's going to graduate and maybe he's ready to finish his career somewhere else. It certainly sounds like he's ready to finish his career somewhere else. So at this point, I would be surprised if Payton Thorne is on this roster to begin the 2023 season. As far as Coleman, again, there is this kind of lifeline, if you want to call it that, with with this thing about if Thorne's not back, that gives maybe a bit of a higher chance for Michigan State to reel Coleman back in. We'll see how that plays out. I mean, I'm not going to speculate on that because it's too early in the process. We don't really know um, enough specific details about that. But what we do know is Coleman already had multiple programs vying for him to enter the transfer portal so they can make a pitch to him officially, according to the rules. Even though they had been pitching him for a long time outside of the rules already. But now that he's in the portal, even programs who do follow the rules can now pitch him. So he's going to get a lot of attention. He's Michigan State's best player. I don't think is that arguable, Aiden?
No, Coleman is easily MSU's best player.
Okay, so
And
he's
I think and Brantley is in the conversation for he's definitely I mean Winman's the best defensive player, but Brantley is definitely in the conversation of like top 3 to 5 best defensive players on the team too.
Yeah, I mean, as far as
So,
like the coaching staff always talk about how every position's open in spring, yada yada. But like there are certain guys who you could write in pen who are starters. Keon Coleman was a starter, and I think Charles Brantley was a starter at one of the cornerback spots. So like
mhm.
those you could mark in pen. So yeah, that's another big loss today for Michigan State. And yeah, I'm with you on um this isn't a fireable offense for Mel Tucker. So
No.
I'm with you on that, but I will say this is a big blow to even the foundation of the program because Coleman was one of his first recruits. Brantley and Coleman, were they in the same recruiting class?
Yeah, they were both class
Yes.
of 21.
So those are two cornerstones of that first class for Mel Tucker. And so that's a shot right across the bow of like the cornerstone of the program. So this is not like the fan base, and this is not specifically to Michigan State. A lot of fan bases are like this. Probably most fan bases are like this, but like that overreact to things. Um, this is like what the way the fan base has reacted to this today is not an overreaction. This is a big deal, and it's not good news for Michigan State. Um, that's pretty much what we know as of now. The next part of this is just kind of waiting to see uh, what the next steps are and where this goes. But yeah, if to kind of put a bow on it, for Payton Thorne, Auburn is a school to look at. They got a new head coach in Hugh Freeze, and they're looking for quarterback help. So that would be a school to watch for Payton Thorne. As far as Coleman, I mean, there are a ton of programs. Our LSU is definitely one. He's a Louisiana guy, as Aiden talked about earlier. Also USC, Miami, different ones. So, and then Brantley, we haven't looked into enough yet to know, but obviously, uh, I'm sure the coaching staff has been on the phone and talking to guys all day. I'm sure, like different, like the position coaches are talking to their positions and getting. I'm trying to bring it all back together. Obviously, with the Brantley news breaking, 45 minutes ago or so, there's gonna be there could be more fallout from this, and we'll just kind of have to ride the wave as that happens. Um, I'm gonna kind of look through questions here a little bit. I know there's been a lot of them, but we kind of had to throw what we know out there.
Mhm.
So if you guys do have some questions, go ahead and throw those in the queue, and we'll answer as many as we can. Let's see here.
I mean, I think yeah, I wonder what Thorne's market is because he is one of the more experienced quarterbacks still left in the portal. And yeah, Auburn is talking about, adding a quarterback. I know Florida, Billy Napier after the spring game said he's looking to add another quarterback. Um, so I mean, there is a market for him. I think people will laugh and be like, "Oh no, there's no way he go to the SEC, or there's no way he get like another Power 5 opportunity, but there's definitely a market for a player with experience like him. Um, Even if it's not in a starting role. I mean, we saw Notre Dame. I know Tommy Rees is the new OC at Alabama, but Tyler Buchner from Notre Dame just transferred to Alabama, and I don't really think that he's better than Jalen Milroe or Ty Simpson, if any of you follow Alabama football.
Yeah.
But still, there's still markets for players like this, and obviously Coleman is a big name, and while Thorne is kind of a grad transfer at this point, Coleman is also going to be looked at as a 1 year guy and then leaving for the pros after this year, and foregoing his senior eligibility. And Brantley has the potential to be in the same boat there, but it is looking closer to probably a 1 or 2 year thing for Brantley more than anything. Probably going to be 2 years.
Yeah, so there was one I wanted to pull up here. It's from Kyle again. Hold on, I'm just searching for it here. Well, there's been a couple people who talked about, is Mel Tucker on the hot seat? I don't believe so, just because he's, I think, 2 years into this 10-year, $95 million fully guaranteed contract. And like, the 5-7 season was the 5-7 season, and yeah, the news today does not bode well at all for the 2023 season. But like, we still have to see what plays out before any type of hot seat discussion comes up. So to kind of put that to bed, no, he's not on the hot seat right now, but things are not trending in the right direction. I think that's fair to say. Kyle, where's Kyle suggested that the here it is. I am sure that Payton Thorne has heard the noise from the fan base and all of that. Like, throughout last year, he heard it. He knows about it. And as I said earlier, he would admit himself that he didn't play up to his standard last year. But I want to be clear here, based on what we've heard today, this was not a situation where Thorne entered the portal, and then because Thorne entered the portal, Coleman decided to enter the portal. That's not how today went down. According to Justin Thind over at Spartan Tailgate 24/7 Sports, Coleman has been planning on entering the portal for about a week to 2 weeks, and Payton Thorne made more of a immediate or quick decision today. So this was not a reaction thing from Coleman after Payton entered the portal. It was more of a in fact, according to Justin, there's a higher chance for Michigan State to retain Coleman by Payton Thorne entering the portal, which speaks to kind of where the culture is at in the program right now, which is not great. So I wanted to address that real quick. You'll have to bear with us a little bit. I'm trying to kind of read through your questions as we're live on the air here. So,
Yeah, and
as far
I
as
mean, it is. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say there has been like I saw a question earlier about incoming transfers. Um, I do like a lot of the guys that Michigan State brought in this year, as far as Nathan Carter from UConn, Jaron Mangum from South Florida. Tunmais Adelaide was a former 5-star or borderline 5-star guy who was at Texas A&M and brought in. So like, there was some pieces here that we were excited about. But this is such a bombshell of a situation now at Michigan State. It's hard to imagine. On one hand, there's going to be more opportunities for guys who are in the portal right now and looking for their next spots. So wide receivers, I would say specifically for Michigan State. Michigan State was already in the market for a wide receiver before Keon Coleman entered the portal. Now you're looking for a number one wide receiver. So you can pitch a lot of guys in the portal. Hey, you come here and you're going to get playing time right away. So we'll have to see how the staff adjusts to this too, and that will come about over the next couple of months.
Yeah, and I mean, I think
There you go. If that makes Michigan State fans smile on a tough day.
yeah, and I mean, just kind of going through the transfer portal, there was I want to say it was a Pac-12 recruiting confidential from the Athletic, and there was a coach that was quoted he was quoted saying, if your school hasn't made a call for a player in the transfer portal or not even in the transfer portal, there's three or four other schools that have already made the call more than once. And I think that, I mean, I think MSU is really going to have to explore their options. You know, this is the last day to enter the portal, I believe. Um,
Yep.
and I think, yeah, so it closes today. So it is going to be a lot of last minute phone calls, seeing who they can get, and then, you know, who they can retain from the portal. I mean, Brantley and Coleman are definitely one and two priorities in the portal right now. Just getting them back is probably their biggest need, and then, you know, looking for another receiver. I don't really think they would bring in another quarterback. Maybe they bring in, you know, someone from a lower level just to give them a little bit of experience, kind of like an Anthony Russo
Yeah.
situation. Um, but I'd be a little surprised if they brought in a quarterback kind of to be the number one guy. I think we're seeing a little bit of a changing of the guard. You know, we've talked about that countlessly with, you know, Thorne is still a Mark D'Antonio recruit, and so is
Yeah.
Noah Kim. And I think part of this is, you know, while it is concerning that Thorne is gone, part of it is a little bit of growth. You know, you're taking a step back, but you might be taking two steps forward. Um, you know, whether Hauser struggles or not, whether he's even the starter or not. But it really just shows like there is, you know, a changing of the guard coming, or like it's pretty much over now. With all of this. So yeah, I really would like to see who, you know, they replace. You know, obviously they got the safety from Cincinnati. I can't remember his name right now. They were
Morian Smith.
right, and then,
Yep.
you know, they had the wide receiver from Nebraska. I can't remember his name either right now. You know, he took a visit and he was there before Coleman even transferred. So they are definitely still in the market to fill out, you know, their roster and all their scholarship spots.
Right. And Cameron, to answer your question, yes, absolutely. There are programs
Yeah,
calling players who are still on rosters and trying to get them to enter the transfer portal. That is going on nationwide.
yeah,
And that is now the part of, and that's part of college football. It's in the fabric of college football at this point. And there's always been shady stuff that's gone on in college football. That's not new, but what's the new parts are NIL is legal, and players can now transfer and not sit out a year. And so that's where um, these phone calls about jump in the portal, we'll throw a big NIL deal at you if you come here. That's a new thing over the last couple of years, because before the deterrent for that was players have to sit out a year if they transfer. And so I don't nobody's calling up a kid and saying, hey, sit out a year and come play for us, even if they were offering money. That just wasn't going to happen. And all of a sudden, with the one time transfer rule, that's why you have so many names in the transfer portal year in and year out. There are thousands of just football players that are in the transfer portal, and so this is kind of where we're at the sport as a sport. To kind of put again, I said this earlier, but to put a bow on this, Aiden, you and I talked about in one of our podcasts previously that we kind of saw this as like a 7-5 team. And we thought that against this schedule, which is brutal, by the way, you play Washington, you play Michigan, you play Ohio State, you play Penn State, you go to Iowa, you go to Minnesota. You lost to Maryland last year. They come to East Lansing, but that's a good team. Like, this is a loaded schedule. And obviously we have to see who the staff brings in to answer this question better. But I guess at this point, Aiden, what kind of impact does this have in a wins and losses standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely has an impact. I think this is more kind of on it's really going to be the eyes are going to be on the coaching this year more than anything. We talked about, the eyes being on the quarterback and kind of the receivers and just the talent in general, but the eyes are going to be on the coaching. Who can they develop? And really, I mean, Tucker's not on the hot seat. Like, I'm just gonna say that right
No,
now. He's
he's
not on
not.
the hot seat. But
Nope.
this is a year where you say, okay, show me what you can do. Show me that you can take this team, to beat you. Okay, hold on, let me restart. So, like, after the 11-2 season, after like winning the Peach Bowl and everything, everyone said, I think this team is going to be better and more talented, but have a worse record. And I think I mean, I don't know. That definitely wasn't the case last year. They were 5-7 and definitely way underachieved, and no one really expected that. But I think that is really the case this year, where if you still go 5-7, or obviously the expectation is to make a bowl game still, and
Right.
I still think that I would set my expectations still at, a 6-6 or 7-5, around there. But even if they go 5-7 again and still show improvement, I think that's going to be more telling than, if they go, 4-8, they beat Central, they beat Richmond, they beat
Rutgers,
Rutgers, and they win some other game like they did
Indiana.
against, yeah, like Indiana, or they win some magical game like they did against Illinois last year.
Right.
Um, like, and then just get blown out every other game. I mean, if they're still competitive against Maryland, if they're still competitive against, you know, Michigan, that should say that. I mean, no one wants to see them go 4-8 or 5-7. I mean, everyone wants to see them make a bowl game. But yeah, that's just the parts of growing. I think, you know, Florida State is a good example of this, where a
Yeah.
lot of people were getting restless and kind of on the edge of their seat and saying Mike Norvell's on the hot seat. And then he just said, give me one more year. Let me develop all these guys for an extra year. We're gonna filter out the players. You know, we're it's addition by subtraction for some of these guys, and give me an extra year. And then, they broke down the dams, and they went 11-2 or whatever last year. They won 10 or more games, and now they're a favorite to win the SEC and potentially make the playoffs. So
Right.
people are going to say it's like another scratch year, but that's just a part of growing a program, from the bottom.
I think what we need to see, if you're a Michigan State fan or somebody who covers the program, and to your point, like, we've heard a lot this spring about the offensive line and how much more depth is there. Like, we need to see improvement at that unit specifically.
Mhm.
We need to see the defense take some strides after being just atrocious against the pass the last couple of years. Now, obviously, that gets a lot harder now without Brantley back there, because now you have to replace the starting corner, and so yeah, you're going to dig into the transfer portal and you're going to see what's out there. But we have to see improvement at specific position groups. And like again, nobody wants to see the 4 wins or the 5 wins, but you have to look for at this point you have to look for marketed improvement in specific areas. Um, and I do want to just last kind of mention on this with Cameron. I understand the mindset here of looking ahead right now based on today's news, and yeah, if they don't add a, a couple receivers to fill out that room, if they don't add a corner, then yeah, you're probably going to see 4 to 5 wins. I guess the point we're trying to make right now is that today on April 30th, Nell Tucker is not on the hot seat. If they go 4-8, he might be on the hot seat in December, but on April 30th,
Right.
he's not on the hot seat. So we'll put that to bed. Um,
Right.
let's shift gears a little bit, and we might circle back to this. But I did when I reached out to Aiden earlier this week about doing a podcast when I got back from Alabama. This was the biggest news that I wanted to talk about, which was the fact that Jaden Akins and A.J. Hoggard both declared for the NBA draft. And so Aiden, just your thoughts on these two guys testing the waters at the next level, and just give me your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I just really think they're gonna be testing the waters. I would expect them to both be back next season. I think Akins is gonna get a lot more productive feedback, I think, than
Yeah,
Hoggard. I think a lot of scouts and just kind of people who have watched Hoggard kind of know what he is. I think he's a guy. I think he knows what he needs to improve on, which is really limiting turnovers. Improve your shooting. Obviously a little bit more speed. But I think Akins is really going to get some more productive feedback in terms of his play because he's really athletic. He has like all the intangibles. His height is really what's holding him back in terms of the reason why he wasn't, a one and done. Because if he's,
sure.
6'6", 6'7", he's probably a lottery pick. Um, but he's only about 6'2", 6'3". So yeah, I think Akins is gonna learn, what his role could be in the NBA and kind of, how he wants to shape his game for the rest of the off season, kind of going forward. And I really think both of them will come back. I don't think either of them are looking to, go pro right now. I think they're both, at the core of this team and they know, what's coming up this season and that they have a really good team heading in the next season. And I mean, everyone that I've talked to are really expecting, Final Four, national championship level expectations. So,
Right.
and I'm sure they set the same expectations for themselves. So that's kind of where I'm at on that.
Yeah. So with the way that the rules work, as far as allowing underclassmen to put their name in the draft, get some feedback, go through workouts with teams, get some feedback, go to the combine, all of that. I like that for college basketball. I think that was a needed
Hmm.
step for college basketball to allow guys to get some feedback before they make this what could be a life altering decision. And I think this is a good decision by both Jaden Akins and AJ Hoggard to just get some more information about what the professional scouts and franchises see from them when they watch their tape, when they watch them, how they perform. Get that feedback, take it back to Michigan State, and try to improve on those things. Um, I agree with you that of the two, Akins is definitely the higher end prospect, and Akins is the more likely to stay in the draft. Not, but I don't expect that.
Hmm.
I do expect Akins to return to Michigan State next season. Even the way he worded some of his, um, it wasn't even a farewell post, but like his declaration of going into the draft, even some of the way he worded that, it just sounded like a toe out the door, but the rest of him still at Michigan State. Um, But I will say that I did not expect Max Christie to leave after 1 year after he put his name into the NBA draft. So
Mhm.
I was wrong about Christie, but that doesn't change how I feel about Akins and Hoggard. Hoggard, on the other hand, with just he played really well down the stretch last 2 to 3 weeks of the season. He was I can't even remember what region they were in, the East, because we were in New York. So they were in the East. He was an all regional team for the East selection. So he played really well in the tournament, but he is not a draftable prospect right now. So he'll get feedback, but I'm at like a 95, and maybe that's even lowballing percent sure that Ogard is coming back. So I don't think there's any cause for concern. And he didn't even put out a declaration until a couple reporters found his name on the early entrance or early entry list. So all signs are pointing towards Hoggard getting some information, coming back to Michigan State, and I am strongly leaning towards Akins doing the same thing. And so, to that end, I think this is a good decision by both guys to get that feedback. And, but yeah, I would be surprised if either guy left. Because I think, to your point, Aiden, I think the guys in that building they know the what kind of team they're going to bring back next year, and it's
Right.
one that will compete for a Big Ten championship, a Big Ten tournament title, and a Final Four. It'll be that caliber of team if the pieces fit together, and obviously that's assuming a lot from this freshman class, but it's the number 3 recruiting class in the country for a reason, with a couple 5-star guys, one of which in Xavier Booker, who is gonna fill a need at power forward. Power forward was thin last year with Malik Hall being banged up for most of the year. Now Hauser's out the door, and they're gonna miss his shooting. And Booker's not going to bring that, but he's going to bring athleticism, a running ability, improved defense for sure. So, and then Jeremy Fears coming in the wings of A.J. Hoggard, and being a backup guard option behind Hoggard, Walker, and Akins. Um, and then I've said this on the podcast before. I think Cohen Carr might be the earliest impact freshman, talking like early in the season, just because of his
Mhm.
length, his athleticism, the way he runs the floor, and again the fact that Michigan State is a little bit light on wing depth. I think the carpet is kind of laid out for him to come in and make an immediate impact. So um, there's a reason why this basketball team is considered top 10, even top 5 in some way too early rankings. There is a lot of talent here. They're bringing back a ton of experience. You lose Hauser, and his shooting will be tough to replace. And the other guy that you're not getting back is Pierre Brooks, who saw his role diminish throughout the year. And so, frankly, I think that was good for both the program and for Brooks to just find a better situation for him. So, yeah, this is news that even Tom Izzo expected it when we had that end of the season press conference, and he said that he expected one or two guys to test the waters and get some feedback, and he didn't seem concerned about it then. And I don't think there's any reason for Michigan State fans to be concerned about it now. If anything, I'm surprised that Walker didn't also put his name in just to get some feedback. It would have been weird for him to have the whole coming back to Michigan State thing, and then like a couple weeks later put his name in the draft. So maybe that's why
Right.
he didn't do it. But I wouldn't have been surprised if Walker had uh, tested the waters too. So um, yeah. Any other final thoughts on this topic, Aiden?
Not really. I kind of do want to go back a little bit just to be like
Sure.
the Max Christie situation was kind of a weird one. Um, I think, his mom was kind of the big basketball star. She played at Northwestern, and I think she had a little bit uh disagreements with Izzo, and I think, obviously as a parent, like, you want the best for your child, and I think she didn't feel like he was getting the I don't know, like, better end better end of this. Like, she thought he was kind of getting a raw deal on that. And I mean, a lot of NBA scouts at the time, still saw there was a good shooter in him, and kind of, yeah. I think yeah, the Christie deal was a little weird, but yeah, I think Akins definitely. Um, I'd be shocked if he goes pro. I'd be shocked if Hoggard, leaves. I don't think either of them are planning on transferring either. So yeah, I think MSU basketball is definitely really exciting for next year. I see a lot of people on Twitter saying like, "Oh, trade MSU football for, MSU basketball gonna win a national championship and Izzo gets his second ring." And I just think that's a little funny
Yeah.
because I'm like that. Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
It,
we did
we had
pose
that
that question.
conversation.
We did
Yeah.
have that conversation, and I did say I would take it if it was guaranteed. But at the same time, it's not guaranteed, and yeah, that's just the way it goes.
It's funny how um, programs just go in waves. And for obviously the majority of history, Michigan football was the king of this state, and Michigan State basketball was the king of this state. And then for a while there, it's with like, I'm not comparing, before anybody gets mad at me, I'm not comparing Tom Izzo to Brady Hoke. Okay, that's not what I'm doing here at all. But for a while there, John Beeline raised Michigan basketball to a level that it hadn't been in a decade and a half to 2 decades, and it became a competitive rivalry between Michigan and Michigan State basketball. At the same time that was happening, you have Rich Rod and Brady Hoke eras for the Michigan football, and so their basketball program goes up, the football program comes down, and then as that's happening, you've got Mark D'Antonio raising Michigan State football to a place that it hadn't been in a long time. And so, but now we're almost seeing a bit of a return to form, I guess you could say, with the way that Michigan's basketball has uh, dipped over the last couple of years. And ironically, they lose their best player to the transfer portal and Hunter Dickinson. And then, a month later, Michigan State football loses its best player. I know we're apples to oranges here, two for different sports,
Right.
but it's funny to kind of see water reach its level a little bit. And I'm not saying that to disparage the football program at Michigan State, but obviously they have a lot of work to do to get back on track. Aiden, was there any other topics you wanted to get to today that maybe were pushed to the back burner by the transfer portal news?
Um, Not really. I mean, just the fact that just all the stuff that came out today was definitely more than enough. Um, but yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I think just stay tuned for the next few days to see more details about all three of those players, and then of course, whether they come back or where they land.
Yeah, obviously we're gonna have a bunch of content up on the Facebook page and our Twitter pages, and our YouTube channel here. So stay tuned for those things, and we do appreciate you guys just giving us a listen tonight. And I do apologize a little bit for how uh, drawn out and long and all over the place the conversation was, but for the added context, I did spend 11 and a half hours in a car today driving from or riding from Alabama up to Michigan. So you'll have to bear with me a little bit on some of the scrambled thoughts and all of that. This was all very new and unexpected today. So hopefully you guys enjoyed our takes on this, and keep it right here at Spartan Nation for more follow-ups in the near future. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.